Hey, welcome to 49cc Scoot. My name's Brent. I got another set of RC-One engine cases, and maybe you saw a recent video where I was complaining about them because they appear to be C1 engine cases that have just been remachined a little bit and passed off to us as RC-One engine cases because they have an extra set of stud holes here in the flange mount area that I didn't want. Those aren't supposed to come with the RC-One. However, Malossi had stated that that's the new design. Whether that's true or not, whatever, it doesn't seem like I'm going to get another case from Malossi, so we're going to work with it. The first RC-One that I got is mostly Malossi's package. It's the MHR 94cc, and the only things that I've really changed are I have a Stage6 programmable ignition on it, and I also changed some stuff in the CVT. So it's got a Polini high-speed variator, it uses a Polini belt, and I use Stage6 torque control clutch bell, and some different springs. But otherwise, as far as I can recall, everything is pretty much Malossi stuff. So Malossi's setup is supposed to be about 25 to 30 horsepower, which is a lot for a little scooter. But Stage6 has this RT100 FL setup that goes on RC-One cases and other FL cases, and they claim that this thing can make about 37 horsepower. I don't know if that's actually what it makes, but hopefully it will at least make more than what I already have. Instructions, gasket kit. Now all nicely packed here in the styrofoam casing. We'll start off with the cylinder itself. This is a 52mm bore, just like the MHR 94cc is. Got a piston kit here. Stage6 provides a coated piston. This is an A piston, 51.95mm it says on there, which that part is pretty nice because Malossi just tells you 0A whatever. They don't actually specify what it's supposed to be. So it's sort of nice to have the manufacturer actually tell you what measurement you should be looking for there. Now the one thing I see already that I don't like, which I had already seen from looking at pictures of it, are the circlips. They use this double ear, or some people call it a double G style circlip. So basically they just got two tabs here that allow you to pinch them with pliers and they will go in super easy. The easiest kind of circlip to install. So it's nice to install. However, some of us believe that they also come out easier when you don't want them to come out. What they do by having these two bent over tabs is they don't go around as much as a standard circlip, and they don't fit in the bore there, that little receiver groove, as much as a standard circlip with no ears on it or a one ear style. Now I have picked up some standard circlips here, and I may use those or I may not. I thought it was at least worth a shot to see if they match up to everything well enough, they're the right diameter, etc. But that's one thing I don't like about the kit. Next up out of the box is the two-part modular cylinder head. Pretty standard setup for a high-end racing kit. They make it easier to adjust and work with. What I do like about the Stage6 kit is that they have raised the combustion chamber out of the head there. So like on the Malossi, that would actually be recessed down into the head. In this case, it's raised above it. And what that does is it makes it fit down into the cylinder a little bit. And what they claim is that that helps to protect the Nicosil up here at the top edge of the cylinder. And I'll also note that Malossi changed their design on their new setup to be like this. So their old setup was recessed, and now they have this that sits proud of the head. Next up, we've got the exhaust flange for the Stage6 cylinder kit, because you got to match that up to their cylinder. There's what that looks like, and then of course it's got all the hardware. And then the rest of the kit is basically just hardware for the kit. Now we can check out the crankshaft, and the reason that you have to get a different crankshaft with this kit, you can't just use the Malossi crank, is because being 100cc, this requires a 47mm stroke, and it has a 100mm connecting rod, and also uses a larger 14mm wrist pin. All right, so in the box, obviously we have the crankshaft, and that has this spacer on it, which I saw a spacer advertised for it and bought one because I thought it didn't come with it. Only thing that I really wasn't a huge fan of with this crankshaft is that it has the full length splines. I'm used to the Malossi that has splines up to maybe here, and then this is a smooth section. That's worked out really well for me. Sometimes in the past with more standard crankshafts, not on high-end stuff, I've had issues over time where the variator will start chewing up because the ramp plate back here has teeth, and it'll start chewing up these a little bit, and sometimes it makes it hard to get the ramp plate to move on here and stuff. So that's why I really like the other setups, but we'll see how it goes with this. The wrist pin bearing, and that is a 14 by 17 by 16.8 bearing. So you've got the flywheel and the variator nut included. There is a seal. I honestly don't even remember if this is supposed to work with a case. I'll have to find out for sure. Then of course you get a couple of stickers. If you've got your own project scooters, be sure to check out ScooterTuning.ca. They've got engine upgrades for all kinds of 2-strokes and 4-strokes. They've got body parts, transmission parts, brake parts, whatever it is that you need for your project. Take a look around and they probably have it. If you don't see it on the site, go ahead and give them a call or shoot them an email, and they've always been friendly and helpful for me. They support this channel and others, and they also sponsor events for the scooter and Grom communities. So please support people that support our hobby. Check out ScooterTuning.ca. It's going to take a considerable amount of work to make this cylinder and the crankshaft fit and match well with the cases. For example, if we look at this base gasket here, the transfer ports especially are huge on this compared to what the Malossi is. Now you have to cut this for the Malossi. You have to cut quite a bit out actually just for the 94cc, but it's not like this. That is a lot of material that has to be removed for that. And then you can see a little bit up here with the boost port. The boost port actually is a little wider on the cases than it is here. Not sure exactly what I'll be doing with that. Still got to decide. Other thing is I'll have these bolt holes hanging over just a little bit into the ports, so I'm going to need to do some filling there. My primary concern at the moment is just, will the cylinder actually fit into the cases? And I know I need to make the crankshaft fit into the cases. Stage 6 tells me in their manual that the bore dimensions are 62 millimeters plus 0.2 millimeters in diameter and 22 millimeters in depth. Now, when I measured this is about 61 millimeters here, and it's about 21.5 millimeters in depth. So it shouldn't fit according to the books. If I actually take the cylinder and put it on there, it does fit in place, and there's actually even a little bit of wiggle room. Now, I am going to put the studs in here just to be 100% sure. Looking good that way. And then if we look down through the reeds, you can see where the bottom of the cylinder skirt there, interacts with the case. And that's all the way down without any base gaskets in place, and I still have clearance. The crankshaft did not come with any information. However, this is available online, and they lay out exactly how you need to cut the cases for this crankshaft to fit. What they tell you is that you need to make one pass at 80.5 millimeters, and then another pass partially down, 7 millimeters down, from each side, from this lip, at 83 millimeters. And the reason is, you can see that the connecting rod actually sits proud of this. So it sits up above this or outside of this circle. A lot of time with crankshafts, it's most common that this circle is going to basically be level with the connecting rod there most of the time, but that's not how they made this. So that's why one pass has to be done at 80.5 millimeters. And that's going to be the pass that gives you clearance for the crank wheels here. Then another partial pass has to be done at 83 millimeters, just part way down here, not all the way to the bottom, but creating a larger section right in the center. You got to do that to both cases, and then that will be what allows this part, the connecting rod here that's sticking out, to clear. While I've never cut the RC-One engine cases for a crankshaft before, I have cut a bunch of Minarelli cases, as well as Honda Dio AF style cases. So I made a cutter up for that because I had done so many. What happens is, this is just a dummy bearing, which if you're unaware, basically just sand the outside and the inside down. That way the crankshaft will slide through there easy, and this will slide into the cases without having to do the work. Great for mock-up. So I'm using that for now just to show you. So you'd have a bearing in here. I made this up on the mini lathe. Just a chunk of steel machined so that it fits in this bearing and so that it can hold a cutter here, and obviously you can adjust the cutter. So that would go in here, and then you would adjust it out to wherever you want to cut, and then you would spin this in the drill and it would turn around and cut the cases here. So I use a bracket on top of this because with another bearing in here, that gives you a lot more support. So now that I've got that, this whole setup can bolt onto here, and then I should have a nice secure setup to machine the cases. This is the style of cutter that I've been using. It's a carbide insert style cutter. I like that because if it dulls, I just switch it out. The only issue I've had is it has this pointy tip there. So what happens is, if I try to cut the cases, if I take a large chunk out of it, then I wind up down here on this base section with a bunch of ridges because I've got essentially this triangular piece that's skipping forward. And you can get them out. I can use carbide burrs or take really, really small bites every time, just barely remove any material, and it'll take them out. But it would be more ideal to me if I had a flatter style of cutter here so that hopefully the base would end up flat without me having to do extra work. I spent quite a bit of time searching because I wanted to find something like this that's an insert style cutter so I could just replace the inserts every time they dull, and then it was always good as long as I could find inserts. However, I couldn't really find those. I found a couple that I thought might have worked, but they were a lot of money, like over $100 for some reason, and I'm not gonna pay $100 for something like this. This was, at the time, I believe about 17 bucks on Amazon. Now these are carbide cutters glued on to this shaft or whatever, the boring bar basically. Not my favorite style of setup, however, it is a nice flat bottom there. First step here for me, while I could use this, I have just taken some masking tape and put it around the edges before and make that a real tight fit in there. That way the bearing isn't moving around because I don't want to wear out the races in here when you do this kind of stuff. But in this case, I have also sanded down the center section, so that gives me more clearance for the cutter, and that creates more play in it. So what I'm going to do instead is I've got this sealed bearing, and I'm going to go ahead and actually install that in the case so that I can get a little less wobble, a little more secure cut there. There we go. The bearings are in there and the cases are cooled down. So the next step is to get the cutter set up how I want. So I need to cut this 78mm case out to 80.5mm all the way around and all the way down first. So my goal here was to get it set up for about a 79.25mm cut the first time. That's halfway between 78 and 80.5. Move this in and out until I get that set up where I want, and then I tighten the little set screw on there. The easy way to give yourself a rough check is that you can push it around by hand, and even by hand you can start removing a little bit of material there. So that'll make a mark, and if you do that all the way around, then you can have your calipers set up roughly where you want them and try to measure what that mark looks like all the way around there. So now I've got this set up for the diameter that I want. The other thing that I normally have to do with the other cutters is set this up so that it stops before it digs into the cases down here. Now you can just let it go and hope that it stops, but it's better to check beforehand. That way you aren't cutting down deeper here on this floor. In this case, it appears that I'm not even going to be able to reach the floor. So if I'm pushing this all the way down, there is a gap between that cutter and the floor. I'm looking at these cutters realizing that they are a bit different in the way they're set up, and I've got a whole pile of them, so I thought maybe I better check and see if any of these cutters will actually do the job and get down lower. Okay, so that's actually much worse. And that one is again worse. I wound up cutting that down as far as I could, at least that I thought was probably safe-ish. It looks like it just will skim the surface here. It's just barely touching. That said, I have a whole bunch of 20mm shims here that I bought so I could adjust these cutters. And just to be safe, I'm going to use a real thin one. It's probably about a 1/2 millimeter. This goes there and moves it up just a little bit. Now I've clamped this thing to the workbench with a big 8-inch clamp, and I've just added a little bit of masking tape to see if maybe I can save the case from scarring there. One last thing is I need some lubricant. I'm just going to use WD-40. Only thing left is basically to hang on to it, because I will tell you, you have these gaps here. And when it hits these gaps sometimes, if it drops, so when it comes across here and drops before it hits that gap especially, it can just bang into that. It's a real sudden stop. Trust me, you will feel it. It looks to me like the thing is cutting very crooked. If you look at this back wall going across, you should see up here it's barely cutting down there any depth. And then over here, it's cutting in there fairly deep. This should be straight based on the bearing. The only reason that should be any different is if the bearing's not in there straight, which it really should be seated all the way. I guess I can double check that. As much as I've used this thing, I don't think I've ever seen this happen before. So the bearing itself, 1.16, 1.18 over here. Try this way. 1.17. I'm not really sure why it's rising up over here and then cutting deep down here, unless maybe this cutter isn't as sharp as the other cutters I'm used to, and perhaps it gets over here and it digs in, and that's why I see a gradual taper, is maybe it's digging in and the pressure from that cut is basically pushing up at me. Anything here should be within a reasonable tolerance. I shouldn't see 5.4 whatever, almost 5.5 millimeters here, and then just over a 1/2 millimeter here from anything that I've seen otherwise. So right now, we're gonna set her back up, try again. The other thing is, if this were way off as far as it was tilted one way or another, I would think this should not be free in these bearings. So I centered these, or did my best to center everything when I set it up. You can see it moves nice and free. If I were to move this off center, it should be trying to bind this, and I'm not getting any of that. It moves really well. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what's happening, because even if I do try to put pressure down, it doesn't really start pushing down. With a good sharp cutter, it'll start pushing down on there and digging in hard. So it's either continue this way, hope for the best, or take the other cutter, put that in there, and hope that it sorts this out. And then possibly, if I'm using the other cutter and I get down to the bottom here, I might be able to put this in enough just to clean the end of it up, the very bottom up, to make a nice smooth base. And for a quick setup, I am just pushing this thing right up against that wall where the other one cut. Spin it around and make sure it doesn't just jam up like it's too close to one, which it doesn't. I think that the situation is improving as far as the difference in the depth. And I can absolutely feel the difference in how easily this thing wants to drop down. You can even see how quickly it has cut down now compared to before. So basically, who would have thought 9 bits for 17 bucks? They're probably not the highest quality in the world. Considering there were multiple swaps and moving bits around and all sorts of things going on, it didn't look too bad for the first pass. So I just went ahead and set the cutter up. So hopefully it'll be the final pass for about 80.5 millimeters here. I'm seeing as much as 80.65, so I actually have overshot a little. I think probably all this slop that you see, it winds up with a little bit larger diameter than I intend. I'll back it off, maybe 1/2 millimeter or so, and then I think I'll go and try to make a couple passes out of it to finish it off. Won't matter for the top, because again, it's got to be recut anyway. Okay, so I'm seeing about 80.6, which is closer than I expected it to be. It's actually overshooting it. So now, the only thing I really want to do with this bottom section is just see if I can put that other cutter in and maybe get a flat floor across there. That actually worked pretty well. Like over here and most of the way around, can't feel really any ridge. There might be a little bit here and there, right in this area, right where it starts. Pretty much same thing I had before with that flat blade is when it gets in here, it's got that momentum and it'll cut in a little more. So it did cut a little deeper there and I can feel a small ridge. I'll probably just sand that a little bit just to clean it up and that'll be good to go. So now I just need to focus on getting this top section to the proper diameter. Now I've got this set up with washers and spacers and shims under there so that it should let me cut down 7 millimeters from the top surface for that connecting rod clearance. Only bad thing is, this area I cut earlier where I said it was no big deal, unfortunately it cut anywhere between about 8.1 to 8.8 millimeters down, but it'll work just fine. I want to see where I'm at because I was trying to be conservative with my cut here just in case. 6.72. So yeah, got to take a little bit of shimming out of here, probably one thin shim. Okay, that's got my cut where I need to be, a little over, that's fine. So now I just need to go ahead and continue cutting this out until it's 83 millimeters up here on the top 7 millimeters. Right now this area is at roughly 82.5 millimeters, so I need to make another cut to take it up to 83. However, I'd really like if the two case halves met up in the center there and matched very, very well. Easiest way that I've found to do that is simply to cut one short, go through all the cutting processes on the other, and then finish the other one up, then leave the tool exactly as it's set, and set it up in the other set of cases, and usually that is pretty much a perfect match because the tool setup hasn't changed any fraction of a millimeter. So I'm going to leave this one alone for now. I'll install another bearing in the other case half, and then I'll go ahead and do the other cuts, hopefully better than I did them this time, and then finish both up. Okay, so I've got about 80.6 to match the other side. Unfortunately, I did have a really, really nice finish on here, but I missed the mark and I hit 80.4 millimeters on what was intended to be my last cut. So I had to make another very small cut and that didn't give me a very good finish. It's not bad, it's not rough, but it doesn't look good. Now I've got the cutter set up for what I hope will be the final cut. As long as it hits 83 or a little bit over 83 millimeters, then I'm going to take this out of here. I'm not going to adjust the cutter at all, and I'll set it up in the other set of cases and try to get that good match there in the center. Got a pretty good finish here and the diameters match each other, so my cutting should be finished. If I hadn't messed up right here on the beginning of the first case, I'd be really happy with the way these turned out. I'm still not upset about it, but that I'll sand out. I've got to sand some areas down here on the floor of the other case and maybe a little bit here just to smooth things out. But for the most part, they're done. Now I'm going to go ahead and bolt these together because I just want to verify that they do look like a real good match here. If you look at this hole here that has a dowel in it, it is right at the edge of the chamfer on that. So you can go a little bit more, you can go a millimeter or more in before you actually broke through anything. But 83 millimeters leaves enough meat that I would call it safe, but not a whole lot of leftover. I'm a little bit disappointed bolting this thing together because I have areas where it's very smooth across there, but then I have areas where they don't meet up exactly correctly here, and there's a little bit of a ridge. So any other time that I've done what I just showed you and just switched the cutter from case to case and not changed it, it's worked really well. What I'm seeing is that right here, for example, it's a really good matchup. Now the cases are flipped over, so you're actually looking at the top near the reeds. And here, it's very clear that there is a difference, there's a gap there or a ledge there. I'm assuming that this is similar to the cause of what we saw before when I tried to use that really cheap carbide cutter and it created that taper going upward, because in that case, it appears that the cutter needs to be sharper or I need to be able to maintain more pressure down on it to keep it where I want it and make a straight cut. So I think probably this is the same deal. My best guess is that maybe I took either too deep of a cut at one point and it created a taper and just kind of tried to follow it around because there is some flex in there, or the cutter just wasn't sharp enough. Not the greatest marks I've ever seen, but at least that'll give me a little bit of a guide to work on this. After a little bit of time, these do fit up quite well with each other. I won't say perfect, but it's a good fit. And then I went over and sanded a bit, finished up with some Scotch-Brite pads just to give them a decent finish. One thing left on these is the crank connecting rod area, which they show you in the instructions right here and say that it could be a clearance issue, which makes sense. So I've marked the cases. They say you should be mocking it up and checking, which I will do. But I'm going to start removing a little bit from each case because I'm pretty sure they didn't put that in there for no reason. I imagine I'm going to have to remove something, so I'm just going to go ahead and start with that much and see if I need any more. The next step is I'm going to use dummy bearings and put the crankshaft in so I can see if it does indeed clear everywhere like it should, or if I need to do more work. So at least it does fit generally. You can see that it is very close when the big end of the connecting rod comes through the area down there. And that's even with me holding the small end way up here where it won't be. If you put it in the center, more like it should be with a piston, then it makes even less clearance in that area. So while it seems okay, I think I'll probably take a little bit more off of that. Only thing I really see is, again, I'm going to need a little more off right down here for the connecting rod clearance. It seems close now, but I'm afraid it's still too close because it's really hard to tell if I'm holding this where the piston should be or not. So I'm going to go ahead and put the cylinder and piston on just real quick and that way I can tell 100% where this will actually be on both sides of the case. As tight as that looks, if I'm looking straight down in there, the clearance in this area is at least equal to, I would say roughly equal to, the clearance that I get the rest of the way around. So if that's what they want, then this should be sufficient. I'll go ahead and check the other case half. Should be the same since I just matched them up to each other, but I'm not going to take that for granted. It is clearing, and if you look at the gap right here and then watch it as it goes through, pretty similar. And I also want to check the entire case, or the entire assembly together, just to make sure I don't suddenly have an issue. Everything spins really free and smoothly, and I'm not seeing any issue looking in there, though to be honest, it's really hard to see down in the reeds to the bottom here where the connecting rod issue would be. But I can't see anything going on, I can't hear anything going on, and I don't feel anything. So I should be good to go as far as the crankshaft clearancing in this engine. With that finished, the next step for me will be trying to port match the Stage6 100cc cylinder to the RC-One cases, and that's going to take a lot of material removal. But before I start that, I've still got to fill the holes that, in my opinion, shouldn't be there because they're for a C1 and they're going to run into the ports. So I've got all that to do next time around, but I'm going to end this video right here. So please give the video a like if you've enjoyed it or found it helpful, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any future episodes and the rest of this build. Thank you for watching.